So next up, we have Mattia, Astaria, and Stefan George. Stefan is the co-founder of Gnosis and working on Gnosis Chain, and Mattia is from Oleksiy. So they're going to speak to us about a decentralized payment ecosystem. So excited to have them on.
Was it kicker out? Okay, so last week we released the first batch of self-custodial debit cards. They look like regular debit cards, they feel like regular debit cards, and they work just like regular debit cards. But you can link them to your self-custodial wallet, and you can tap your crypto at any store today without giving custody of your funds to anyone else. Now, this is the first time that we talk about our product in front of an audience. So if you type Oleksiy into Google, you won't find much information yet. Cool. So where are we going with this? We are here to bring decentralization to a world that right now has centralized options, which is the world of card payments. And when we talk about bringing decentralization, we simply talk about opening up the environment to much more competition, which ultimately leads to more benefits for the user. Now, let me show you just how much is needed in the world of payments. Ever since electronic payments was created, it was never disrupted. You may disagree with me right now, so hear me out. Let's look at the evolution of payments on the front end. And one thing you should know here is that the whole world of payments revolves around the word trust. And evolution happens every time someone creates a more secure or more scalable way to create trust between the two parties, one of them being the merchant and the other one being the consumer. So before the 1950s, your trust was only local. You would go to the local merchant, you would buy your groceries, and then you would walk out, and then you could decide to come back and pay later, let's say at the end of the month. This was an amazing experience, but still very limited, because what if you went to another merchant? You couldn't do the same. So in the 1950s, someone created the Diners Club card, which is essentially a way to create trust between a bunch of wealthy individuals and a series of restaurants. Right now, you had this card, you would walk into a restaurant, you would show it, and you had your meal, and then you would walk out. Amazing, but still very limited. So, Bank of America in the 1960s figured out a way to scale this way beyond just restaurants to pretty much every consumer and every merchant that could possess one of these two. One of them being the Bank America card, and then the other one being the card imprinters. This was very good in terms of coverage, like at least a lot better, but a lot worse in terms of processes. Because all of a sudden, right now, as a merchant, you had to call a number, get an authentication code, verify an ID, get a signature, use one of these machines, and then you would have to collect all these pieces of paper and send them by mail to the card schemes at the end of the month, or at the end of the day, the week, depends on how many you had. So this logistical nightmare was solved by the magstripe, which solved all of this, but it was still very vulnerable when it became to signature fraud, because you could sign Mickey Mouse, and then you could come back and call and say that it wasn't you making the payment. So then we evolved chip and pin, NFC, and then finally, we arrived to the phone. I mean, right now you have a way to know that it's you making the payment and nobody else, just via biometric authentication. Amazing. And just when you thought, or at least like just when I thought that we couldn't take this further, then these guys came. And these guys, in my opinion, are the holy grail of today's generation of payments. I mean, right now you walk into a taxi, you don't know the taxi driver doesn't know you, but you know that you're gonna get to where you wanna go, and the taxi driver knows that, or trusts that you're going to pay. And in the middle of it, you're going to do what actually matters, which is, developing a relationship, talking about your life, politics, jobs, whatever. So, how was payments not disrupted? I mean, like, we went from the 1950s till right now. Well, let's look at the back end. So, in the 1970s, a bunch of banks got together to create the standards to do authentication, clearing, and settlement, which is essentially a way for you to move your funds around. And in the case of Visa, these were called Visa Base 1 and Visa Base 2. BASE stands for Bank of America Systems Engineering. If you guys recall the Bank America card on the previous slide, Visa is a spin-off of Bank of America. So now, let's see what happens over the years. So 1990s, 2000, 2010, and then the present. I mean, this is insane. This is like having the most amazing TV with, LCD technology, very thin, but with 1973 resolution. And let's put some data to it, 90% of all credit card transactions still rely on mainframe. And for those of you that are not familiar with mainframes or don't know what mainframes are, essentially they're this big metal cabinets, full of circuitry, which were first released by IBM in 1969 and still power 92 of the top 100 banks in the world. Okay? So, so was payments really disrupted, or was payments adapted on one side to talk to a bunch of old technology? I don't know. I'll let you guys figure it out. But the point here is, what happens in the ecosystem when you have, innovation only on one side? In this case, on the front end. This happens. You go from a system that is originated to be like this. It's the 5-party model, to this. Essentially, you have a bunch of aggregators, orchestrators, whatever else, all these new players coming in to simply be in the mid between newer technology and older technology. Why? Because an iPhone cannot talk mainframe, right? So, what do you think when every time a new player comes into this giant beast? Do you think all the other players go and say, well, you know what, it makes sense, like here's a piece of my revenue? No, it's added cost. It's added cost for the merchant, and who ultimately pays the cost of the merchants? Us, the consumers. So, what's the true cost of all of this? What's the true cost of, banks that typically spend 80% of their IT budget on legacy technology maintenance, which another way to look at this is banks spend 20% of their budget on innovation. Or what's the true cost of university graduates that don't want to, pursue a career in this space? Because, who wants to get out of university and start learning COBOL or mainframe? Nobody. Well, the true cost of this is hard to quantify, but every single piece of paper from, Wharton, Berkeley's, all those reputable universities link to this. It's negative GDP. And every inefficiency in the payment system or in the financial systems links to inefficiencies transmitted to SMBs, which by definition power countries' economies. So you have negative impact on GDP. And another way of looking at this in a more, let's say, more visual way is every time a settlement takes 3 days to go from the consumer to the merchant account, then the merchant will have lower working capital, therefore lower money to innovate, to expand, and all of that, and therefore negative GDP. Or every time all these costs, if you look at the bottom one, are passed on to SMBs, then there's higher costs for the consumers, cost push inflation, negative GDP. Cool. So what are we building? Okay? So we're here to use this self-custodial spending technology to build an alternative payment network, one that leverages the front end and then disrupts the back end. Why do we want to leverage the front end? Is because if there's one thing that payments did right, and for all of us, is the coverage. I mean, right now you have trillions of transactions going through multi-countries. You have all the systems, and that's what we want to leverage. Now, I am going to pass the microphone to Stefan, that is going to talk about how the system works, and then he's going to address the Oliphant in the room. Our company name is Oliphant. I was waiting for this pun. Of who are we? I mean, are we just another payments company? How do we position ourselves to achieve our mission? And what is it that we're going to be doing? You want a card?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Mattia. Oh yeah, I need this one. The other one. Yeah, who are we? Actually, like, maybe let's first step a little bit back. Like, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. That's a title that Satoshi Nakamoto was choosing for this, as title for the Bitcoin white paper. And the main application should be actually becoming a payments network, a store of value, digital gold. You will not find this in the Bitcoin white paper. However, today, I think you will not find not even any Bitcoin maximalist who would argue that Bitcoin will become the globally accessible payment network. And the question is, like, why? It's not only a fault of Bitcoin. In fact, like, we don't have any actual like payment system touching the real world running on blockchain today. And over the last, I would say, 5 months, since we kind of start talking to SaltPay, I also became increasingly aware of like why this has not happened yet, because it requires a lot of different skills actually to be able to accomplish a payment network. It's by far not only a technical challenge, but it's about understanding how today's payments work, how payments network works, which parties are involved, and having relationships with all of those parties to make them aware of a new potential solution. And you need teams that understand both sides, right? That understand the traditional payment side and that understand the tech. That's where Tangem comes into play. So Tangem has been building these cards, knows exactly how they integrate into the existing payments world, but they also understand how to build chips. They understand how blockchain works, and they are kind of the connection between the old world of SaltPay, sorry, and the new world, which is kind of blockchain infrastructure, which now obviously Gnosis also provides. And as a result of this joint venture over the last couple of months, we have now this card that Mattia already showed to you, which on the surface looks like an ordinary credit card. However, it also is a hardware wallet. So all of those cards have a hardware wallet integrated, and they allow you to do payments in crypto. So this card allows you to do regular credit card payments as you're used to, so it doesn't really disrupt your experience. However, everyone who has this card also has potentially an account on Gnosis chain and can use crypto to actually pay for fiat transactions. So how does this work under the hood? So with Tangem, or with the Visa protocol, there's actually a field in the Visa protocol where you can send arbitrary data, and Tangem started using this to transport signatures, blockchain signatures, over the Visa network to settle payments. And when now a user is actually going to a coffee shop and wants to pay, he can use his card, he can just do a regular payment and can confirm this on his mobile phone. and this will sign a blockchain transaction, a Gnosis chain transaction, which is sent over the Visa network. Then, the part which is about the exchange is actually sent to an exchange, can be operated by us or another entity, which allows to convert the crypto to fiat if the merchant only wants to have, if the merchant only accepts fiat. And and of course, ultimately, we want to have a peer-to-peer system. So the ultimate goal, obviously, is to allow the customer to directly pay the merchant and eventually just go straight over Gnosis chain or other blockchains. And I think that's kind of the revolution here, because we don't disrupt the user experience. We are able to distribute hardware wallets to thousands, 100,000s, maybe millions of users without them even knowing, and then eventually turn them into actual crypto users and make them aware of the opportunities that there are if they're actually using blockchain. And for me, it's kind of similar to the time when we started using Skype. I guess many of you have been using Skype in the past. I was one of the first users, and it allowed me to do calls with other friends without having to use the landline or the mobile phone. And then at some point, Skype developed Skype Out and Skype In, which allowed you to do phone calls from Skype into the regular phone network and vice versa. And today, pretty much every communication we do is all done over the internet. And I think this here is kind of the same inflection point where now we have the opportunity to use the old infrastructure to actually do crypto payments, and then hopefully in the future, all of these transactions will actually be done over blockchains. And that's why I think this card is such an important piece to the overall story, and a nice segue to onboard potentially millions of users to what we are doing. Thank you.
Okay, so we open it up for question. So if you hold any assets on Gnosis chain right now, here we put a QR code for you to get early access to the cards. Of course, you can find us after to to speed up the card. Maybe you can convince one of us to give you the cards right now. But that's it. Any questions? Where is it?
Hi. Can you break down a bit, coming from the merchant point of view, how it would look like if a new merchant wants to adopt this payment process?
Right, so at the beginning, the great thing is nothing has to change for the merchant to accept a crypto transaction, because in fact, if the merchant only cares about fiat, it will still be converted for him, and so he doesn't care. To convert the merchant into an actual crypto user, that requires more education. There also SaltPay comes into play. Probably most of you have never heard about SaltPay. It was the same for me. I never heard about this company because they are mostly a company serving merchants, or you have very much the merchant perspective. Maybe
that's a key question to this joint venture, is that the SaltPay group, and I started there 3 years ago when we were very small, and then right now we became 2,000 plus people and all that. But we have access to 500,000 merchants in Europe, and if you look at the group overall, actually we have 1.5 million, something like that. But the whole idea is, the sales strategy there is, you cultivate a relationship with the merchants. So you as a sales agent, you have routes every day. Then you go and you talk to the merchant. You know how many kids they have. You go play soccer with them, and that's how we expanded. That's how we became very, very big. So the whole idea of education will be on the crypto space will be conducted by the field agents onto the merchants. Right now, the merchant doesn't need to know anything about crypto. When you spend, they're going to receive their funds in fiat. But later on, it's just a matter for us to push an applications onto the terminals, onto the POS, which are Android-based. So it's just a matter of pushing something, and then the moment that they want to activate, they have a button that they push in their merchant portal, and they have this. So yeah, there's going to have to be a lot of education on the merchant side for sure that we expected. But I hope that answers your question. Yep.
Will there be privacy in the new protocols? Or is it like everything?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, my question is, will there be privacy in the protocols? But the thing to criticize about credit card payments is that it's you leave a data trail.
Yeah, good question. So the first version will not have, like this kind of MVP that we are launching doesn't have this privacy feature yet. But of course, like we would like to enable this, and from a technological perspective, that can be solved. So yes, we want to make it part of the core protocol. Yes, it's very important. Like we don't want to make your payments public to anyone. So.
Unfortunately, I think we have to cut questions there, but maybe people can find you afterwards. Is that?
What's that?
Maybe people can find you afterwards if they have more questions.
Of course.
Awesome.
Always welcome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.